The following program is a color feature presentation on the Hughes Sports Network.
Bring it in, baby! Come on, Bobby, hit somebody! Hurry! Come on, let's go! Get on, stick him! Come on, now, get him back! We gotta have it back! Make it go! Make it go! All right, take it in! Take it in!
This Week in Pro Football is brought to you by Hager, the Slacks people. We make everybody look good. And by the 1972 Buick, something to believe in.
Hi, I'm Tom Brookshire.
And I'm Pat Summerall. Last week, the NFL surprises continue to come. And after just 2 weeks of playing for keeps, of the 26 teams, only 4 have perfect records. Dallas and Washington in the NFC East, and they play each other this week. Cleveland in the AFC Central, and the surprising Chicago Bears in the NFC Central.
Right, Pat, and those surprising Bears knocked Minnesota off the unbeaten list a lot earlier than the Vikings are used to. And it seems to me that last week we were talking about how unbeatable Cincinnati and Baltimore looked, and now all of a sudden no team appears unbeatable.
We'll be back to show you the 4 unbeaten teams and all the rest of the best parts of last week's action right after this message.
In Buffalo, the Bills and Dolphins got into a rushing duel, which Miami won merely because they had twice as much of a good thing.
The Miami Dolphins visited Buffalo, where they went up against the Bills' Big Blue offense, otherwise known as number 32, O.J. Simpson. Although O.J. was superb, even he was no match for Miami's twin cannons, number 21, Jim Kick, and number 39, Larry Zonka, both of whom rushed for over 100 yards in the game and displayed one of the best balanced attacks since the days of Horning and Taylor. But while both teams were showing off their big guns, it was the littlest guy on the field who stole the show as Garo Yepremian booted 5 field goals and 2 extra points to make the final score Miami 29, Buffalo 14.
Well, Pat, it's easy to see that both the Dolphins and Bills have exciting offensive performers, and these young guys should provide many thrills for years to come.
While those teams appear to have built consistent offenses, both the Broncos and the Packers are still looking for the right combinations.
In Green Bay, there are a few players remaining from the Packer teams that once dominated pro football. Age and injury have taken their toll, and with all-time great Bart Starr still sidelined with an injury, the rebuilding process has hit the quarterback position where rookie Scott Hunter, also of Alabama, is the heir apparent. The Denver Broncos, too, are rebuilding, and many of their hopes depend on the performance of former Packer Don Horn, number 13, who was once the future hope in Green Bay. But Horn received a vicious greeting on his return to his old stomping grounds. Horn has always had a strong arm, but the Pack traded him to Denver because he was erratic and had been plagued by interceptions. His old teammates must have known exactly where he would throw. They picked off 6 of Don Horn's passes. This interception by number 43, Doug Hart, set up the first Green Bay touchdown. A 5-yard shot by Donnie Anderson, number 44. Number 12, Zeke Bratkowski, came out of retirement this season, and his 39 years add experience to the youthful backfield that includes the Pack's #1 draft choice, number 42, John Brockington. Brockington sprinted 52 yards for a touchdown in the second period. He's a 225-pound blockbuster from Ohio State, who adds the power that complements the jackrabbit speed of number 25, Dave Hampton, another Green Bay running star. Brockington and Hampton can both fly, and rookie Scott Hunter, number 16, showed he can turn on the speed too. His third period touchdown made the score 27-6. The sluggish Broncos' only show of life came late in the fourth quarter when linebacker Fred Forsberg picked off a Green Bay pass. The interception led to the only Denver touchdown, a 6-yard pass from reserve Steve Ramsey, number 10, to number 80, Jerry Simmons. The rebuilding Packers 34, Denver 13.
When Kansas City and Houston met last Sunday, the Chiefs came away the winner. But for Hank Stram and his men, the wins aren't coming as easy as they used to.
In Houston's Astrodome, the Kansas City Chiefs wasted no time in getting things going as Len Dawson hit number 88, Morris Stroud, on this pass. He then came right back to hit number 17, Elmo Wright, which set up a 1-yard touchdown and an early Chief lead. But the Oilers stayed in the game by making the most of any break that came their way. Chiefs running back Warren McVeigh provided the break, and Houston's Ken Houston went 68 yards with a fumble to put the Oilers on the scoreboard. Houston's rookie signal caller, Dan Pastorini, was looking good as he hit number 18, Charlie Joyner, to give the Oilers a 16-13 lead. But the lead was short-lived as the Kansas City defense turned suddenly vicious and began to manhandle Pastorini. And while the front four put an all-out charge, the secondary gobbled up the rookie's mistakes. In the end, it was Warren McVeigh atoning for his earlier miscue as he swept in to make the final score 20-16. The Chiefs had won, but as McVeigh can attest, it didn't come easy.
I don't know what happened to the Raiders in New England on opening day, but whatever it was, I think it's been forgotten, by the Raiders anyway.
I'll bet you San Diego would like to forget what the Raiders did to them last week, Pat.
Things were busting out all over in San Diego's Balboa Stadium when the Oakland Raiders came to town. Sid Gilman was busting out with pride and enthusiasm, for his Chargers had upset the Chiefs in their opening game. Raider coach John Madden was busting out with the worries because on opening day, Oakland had been upset by the Patriots and had taken a physical beating as well. But even worse than that was the fact that Darryl LaMonica and the famed Raider offense had scored a mere 6 points against New England. Could it be that Oakland was in trouble? It looked that way as the Chargers grabbed everything that came in their direction. The way the Raiders were playing, it was enough to make any coach hopping mad. But then the Raider defense snapped to life, and Charger quarterback John Hadel and his receivers were engulfed in a crush of black shirts. And then at long last, the Oakland offense roared to life as number 28, Clarence Davis, inspired the ground game. And Darryl LaMonica was his old self again as he and Fred Biletnikoff teamed for 5 receptions and 2 scores, which put the Raiders ahead 28-0. Then reserve quarterback Ken Stabler mopped up on a 1-yard sweep, and the Chargers' humiliation was complete. For San Diego, it was one of those days when they looked on in wonder and decided they didn't like what they saw. Unfortunately, not even pure oxygen could help because the Raiders had stormed to victory with a vengeance, 34-0, and it was enough to take your breath away.
We'll have more exciting action on This Week in Pro Football right after this brief message. In Philadelphia, the Cowboys ran well, passed well, and played defense well. That left next to nothing for the Eagles to do, and that's just what they did.
For the second straight week, the hapless Philadelphia Eagles suffered another humiliating defeat. Against the Dallas Cowboys, the Eagles' only stick-out player was safety Bill Bradley, number 28, who intercepted 2 passes. Bradley is a free spirit whose abundant talent is laced with a strong dose of temper and competitive fire. The Eagles' only touchdown came when Mike Clark shanked a field goal try and Fleet Al Nelson burned a 101-yard seam across the soggy AstroTurf to save Philadelphia from a shutout. Except for Nelson's score, the Dallas Cowboys played flawless football. The specialty teams, led by number 43, Cliff Harris, gave the offense perfect position to launch a varied arsenal that has scored an incredible 91 points in just 2 games. One man who can always be counted on to generate some scorching offense is number 22, Bob Hayes. At times, the Cowboys scored so easily it looked like a dummy drill on a practice field. Quarterback Craig Morton's command of Dallas' multiple offense gave setbacks like Walt Garrison, number 32, clear avenues to the end zone. But the real heroes for Dallas were the 11 men that comprised the doomsday defense. They made the Eagles pay dearly for the meager 32 yards they gained rushing. Their awesome rush rattled quarterback Pete Lisk, number 14, so much that he threw and ducked all in one embarrassing motion. This blend of unrelenting pressure forced Lisk and his sub Rick Arrington to throw 7 interceptions, 3 of which were stolen by Herb Adderley, a cornerback considered washed up by Green Bay 2 seasons ago. The doomsday defense even scored a touchdown when end Larry Cole, number 63, rode over his blocker and jolted the ball from Pete Lisk into the eager hands of Bob Lilly, who majestically strode for 6 points. For the Cowboys, it was a satisfying 42-7 victory. For the Eagles, it was another depressing trip to oblivion.
6 interceptions. Not exactly the kind of day for Pete Lisk to rush out for the morning newspapers.
And it certainly wasn't Fran Tarkenton's day either, as he went up against the Redskins.
In the 1971 draft, the New York Giants sought to find the blazing fast receiver to complement quarterback Fran Tarkenton. Unfortunately, their number 1 pick, Rocky Thompson, came to camp with fingers like stone. So this Sunday, the Giants went with Plan B against the Redskins and found out the receiver's fingers still had not thawed. Behind a porous forward wall, Tarkenton had many a rough rendezvous with the newly rebuilt Redskin front four. Fran tried everything. He tiptoed up, and he cat-footed back. And then he got flattened time and time again. The Redskins poured in so quickly, Tarkenton began accepting them as part of his own backfield. And finally, Fran became so enamored of his newfound friends, he showed them his new two-handed overhead pass, and they didn't like it at all. When the chaos calmed, the veteran-studded Washington defense, led by linebacker Jack Pardee, number 32, picked Tarkenton clean, and Washington was on its way to victory number 2. Even Tarkenton's replacement, Randy Johnson, couldn't find the hot hand as the hungry Redskins just ate up the Giant attack. Washington head coach George Allen waited patiently for his team to explode, but unfortunately, the usually sure hands of Charlie Taylor turned into boards. Fortunately, Taylor's lapse was only momentary, for he came back to stun New York on a 3rd-and-1 situation, when quarterback Billy Kilmer's deception left him with a clear path to a 71-yard touchdown. Taylor's second touchdown covered 70 yards less, but gave Washington all the points they needed for a 30-3 triumph. Next for the Redskins, an appointment in Dallas with the undefeated Cowboys.
We'll be right back to This Week in Pro Football following station identification. This is the Hughes Sports Network. In the second half of our show, we'll take a look at the NFC West, where each team has won once, except for the surprising Rams, who last week just barely managed to tie.
We'll also look at the NFC Central, where the amazing Chicago Bears are now the only unbeaten team.
And we'll look at the AFC Central, where Pittsburgh and Cleveland both pulled off surprising upsets.
And in our feature pad, we'll take an in-depth look at one of pro football's most exciting players, a receiver with moves you really won't believe.
We'll have all of this and more exciting action on This Week in Pro Football right after this brief message.
As we saw just a few minutes ago, Charlie Taylor is the kind of player who can break a game open with one play. Charlie Taylor is one of football's most exciting players, the kind of receiver that, well, I'm glad I don't have to cover him one-on-one. He might have retired me early. I feature this week Charlie Taylor of the Washington Redskins.
The player wearing number 42 is a man to be feared. He is Charlie Taylor of the Washington Redskins. Taylor has made it the dazzle of a setback with the toughness of a tight end to become the most dangerous receiver in pro football. Taylor did not obtain immediate stardom in the pros as he did in college. At Arizona State, he made All-American, not as a receiver, but as a halfback whose legs were as quick as his smile. The legend of the long-distance runner soon spread to the pros, and after his senior year, Taylor's dancing feet, surging power and talent for producing touchdowns carried him to the Redskins. Fans filled D.C. Stadium to see the rookie who would liberate Washington's running game from mediocrity. Taylor was an instant idol, and his weaving runs made him Rookie of the Year in 1964. After 2 spectacular years, the blush of greatness faded. Taylor's speed and impatience carried him away from his blockers and made him cannon fodder for defenses. Impatient fans brought frustration-bred fumbles. In 1966, Charlie Taylor lost both his admirers and his teammates. Mistakes generated desperation, and the long-distance runner, drowned in his own talent, became a forgotten man, yesterday's hero. The renaissance in Taylor's career came when head coach Otto Graham switched him to end at mid-season. The touchdown maker was dramatically revived, and at the end of 1966, Charlie Taylor was the NFL's leading receiver. The freedom at receiver unleashed the sinew and soul of Taylor. He was free to flame by defenders, free to exhibit the hands, grace, and spirit of the superstar. In 1967, he reclaimed the adulation, the confidence of his teammates, his zest for the game, and his smile. In 1969, Vince Lombardi came and rekindled the Redskins' long-lost will to win. Now Taylor was more than just a league-leading receiver. He was an instrument of victory. The Redskins became winners for the first time in 14 years. The maestro was Vince Lombardi, but the virtuoso was Charlie Taylor, a solitary figure weaving, bobbing, feinting, giving the defender a glimpse of his whip-thin body, then vanishing. Charlie Taylor's trademark is the back of his jersey, saying goodbye to the defense. It is part of the legend of the long-distance runner who wears number 42 for the Washington Redskins.
Jim Plunkett and the New England Patriots exploded into 1971 with a stunning upset victory over the Oakland Raiders. Last week, they faced another challenge: what to do for an encore.
For a week now, New England fans have been living in a dream world, spurred to flights of fantasy by a larger-than-life rookie, Jim Plunkett. Everyone knows Jim Plunkett, Heisman Trophy winner and first pick of the pros, but who could have predicted the ease with which he would transfer his scoring act from Stanford to the NFL? Without missing a beat, here was Jim Plunkett again, wearing the old crimson and white and throwing spectacular scoring strikes to Rabbit Vataha, number 18. The collegiate enthusiasm generated by Plunkett and Vataha produced an opening season upset over the Raiders and a new wave of optimism on a team that needed it badly. Here was number 30, Carl Garrett, forgetting about disastrous 1970 and recovering that raucous running style of 2 years ago. Optimism and upsets are great tonic, but this was another week, and these were the Detroit Lions. The Lions, burned by an opening season loss to Minnesota, set out to teach Plunkett the difference between the Pacific 8 and the NFL. Plunkett could manage only 5 completions to go along with his 61-yard touchdown to Vataha. And number 53, Mike Lucci, neutralized that score, returning an errant toss 25 yards to the end zone. While the Lion defense was bringing Jim Plunkett abruptly back to earth, the Detroit offense was clouding a few Patriot dreams with some good old-fashioned Central Division ball control. Number 42, Alty Taylor, led the 4 yards of crack troop as the Lions beat up the Patriots and controlled the tempo of the game from the very outset. Taylor took care of the last 4 yards, and Detroit jumped to a commanding 20-point lead before the Patriots could even get on the scoreboard. And suddenly that all-too-familiar feeling was coming back to Coach John Mazur and his Patriots. For the clincher, Detroit turned to its Heisman Trophy winner, number 36, Steve Owens. Owens had just enough to hold off the closing rush of number 44, John Outlaw. And the 74-yard trudge put the finishing touches on the Patriots. In the end, Steve Owens had the longest play of his football career. The Lions had their first victory of the season. And optimistic New Englanders were reintroduced to the harsh reality of life in the NFL. Detroit 34, New England 7.
Two major upsets in a row are a lot to expect of a rookie quarterback, Tom, even one as precocious as Jim Plunkett.
That means he's young, right?
I think so.
I guess you're right, though, Pat, and I do have a feeling the surprises this season are far from over. This week, the Chicago Bears demonstrated that no one is safe from the threat of upset, not even the mighty Vikings.
Minnesota fans have grown accustomed to the style of Viking football, but on Sunday, one thing seemed out of place. Bud Grant was actually seen smiling before the game. Perhaps it was a result of the Viking opening season triumph over Detroit, or maybe it was because Chicago was the opponent and the Vikings were solid favorites to beat the Bears for the 5th straight time. It seems unlikely that this could be the case because the Bears still had Butkus, and any Viking-Bear match was guaranteed to produce the rough-hewn style that is now the trademark of the Central Division. When the Bears and Vikings meet, defense sets the tempo and controls all the variables. Sunday was no exception as they stood toe-to-toe and batted out a scoreless first quarter. But despite the Butkus-led Bear defense, Minnesota has won 4 in a row with an ability to come up with a big play. Gary Quazzo to Bob Grimm touchdown passes gave the Vikings a healthy fourth quarter lead, and it looked as though the Bears would inflict their quota of bruises and then go down to defeat again. But the Bears have another weapon this year. Number 16, Kent Nix, warmed up on the sidelines when starter Jack Concannon was shaken up. 1 week previously, Nix had replaced Concannon in the fourth quarter to throw the winning touchdown pass against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Concannon left, Nix entered, and he wasted no time in reenacting the scene as he struck again on the next play. Number 45, Dick Gordon, threaded his way 36 yards to make Kent Nix look like a miracle man. For the second week in a row, Nix had come up with the hot hand, but this time the opponent was mighty Minnesota, not Pittsburgh. And the Bears were still 4 points down with less than 2 minutes left. But Kent Nix was not finished yet. Again it was Gordon, and again it was good for a victory. With 17 fourth quarter points, the Bears suddenly found themselves 20-17 victors over the Vikings, undefeated in 2 games and alone on top of their division. Heady stuff for a team which before the season seemed destined to watch from the basement as Detroit and Minnesota battle for the title. Can Chicago nurture their dream? Much depends on the ability of Kent Nix to maintain his Midas touch.
A rivalry doesn't have to be old to be bitter. Some enemies just come by it naturally. For the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals, there was pugnacity at first sight.
In Pittsburgh, the young and tough Steelers hosted the young and tough Cincinnati Bengals to see who was the toughest and who was most likely to come of age in 1971. Defense keynoted the first half, and the Bengals' big cat, number 74, Mike Reed, led the charge for Cincinnati. But Pittsburgh's defense proved to be the stickiest, and number 34, Andy Russell, made sure that Jess Phillips got the message. Led by 11-year veteran Chuck Allen, number 58, Pittsburgh's linebackers completely shut down the Cincinnati sweep. Number 11, quarterback Virgil Carter, opened up only once on this 46-yard play to Speedy Thomas. But the attack failed. And although Horst Muhlmann's 33-yard field goal put the Bengals on the board first, these were the only points Cincinnati's offense could muster. Meanwhile, Terry Bradshaw seeded the Steelers' offense with long aerial strikes to number 88, second-year wide receiver Dave Smith from California State College in Indiana, Pennsylvania. Obviously, being from California State and Indiana, Pennsylvania was enough to confuse the Cincinnati secondary, because Smith was wide open for Terry Bradshaw's first touchdown toss. Bradshaw's second touchdown pass was deflected off the hands of Bengal safety Sandy Durko and into the arms of number 26, Preston Pearson. After losing to the Chicago Bears last week on 2 late fumbles, Pittsburgh appeared willing to give away another game when Lamar Parry stole the ball from Preston Pearson and carried it in for a score. But not so this week. Some good blocks by Chuck Allen and Rocky Blyer and a smart 67-yard return by John Staggers settled the young tough issue, at least for the time being, in the Steelers' favor, 21-10.
It's hard to tell the spoilers from the contenders in that AFC Central Division, Pat.
Sure is, Tom, but somebody better remember to beat the Cleveland Browns, and that's beginning to look like a big bang-up job.
In Baltimore's Memorial Pit and part-time quagmire, light-footed Leroy Kelly and the Cleveland Browns showed no respect for the world champion Colts. Slick Colt receiver Eddie Hinton was received rudely by the Browns' Ben Davis and Mike Howell. And number 51 Dale Lindsey reaped the fruit of their meeting and returned it to the Baltimore 6. From there, Leroy Kelly circled into the end zone behind picture book blocking. Last week against the Jets, Norm Boulay set a Colt rushing record, gaining 198 yards. But against the Browns and number 80 Turkey Jones, it was a different story. Number 35, Bo Scott and Leroy Kelly did not run wild, but they did what had to be done. And Kelly accounted for both Cleveland touchdowns. In the end, 2 mistakes almost cost Cleveland the game. Number 83, Ted Hendricks, blocked a Don Cockcroft punt, and the human bowling ball, number 48, Don Nottingham, turned it into a 6-point play. Near the end of the game, number 22, rookie Clarence Scott, left the Browns in precarious field position by intercepting a 4th and 17 pass at the Cleveland 6. But the Browns hung doggedly tough through the grim afternoon and won a 14-13 upset victory over the world champion Baltimore Colts, handing Nick Skorich his second success in 2 tries as the new head coach in Cleveland.
In the NFC West, the Atlanta Falcons are still surprisingly on top. But last week in Los Angeles, the Falcons were fit to be tied.
After their shocking loss in New Orleans the previous week, the Los Angeles Rams were ready to dazzle the visiting Atlanta Falcons with their Tommy Prothro razzle-dazzle footwork. The razzle-dazzling Rams scored the game's first touchdown on, of all things, a fake field goal pass from holder Jerry Rome to tight end blocker Bob Klein, number 80. The Rams' only other touchdown came on a perfectly executed 50-yard draw play to Willie Ellison, who totaled 138 yards rushing for the day. The Falcons' best offensive play was a screen pass from Bob Berry to Jim Butler, who cannonballed to the Falcons' first touchdown. Late in the third quarter, number 23 first draft choice Joe Profit drove over to give the Falcons a 20-17 lead after 3 quarters. In the final period, the Rams seemed certain to regain the lead, but at the Atlanta 4, Les Josephson fumbled. And from there, the Falcons moved all the way to the Ram 20, where on 4th and 1, Van Brocklin gambled for a first down and lost. Trailing by 3 with a minute and a half to play, Roman Gabriel took over at his own 21. He proceeded to move the Rams upfield, first with a screen to Willie Ellison, then with a short pass to Larry Smith, who landed on the Falcon 40. With 1 second remaining, David Ray, cut by the Falcons just 2 years before, was called upon to kick a 47-yard field goal, longer than any he'd ever made before. He tied the game 20-20, and in 10 tries, the bedazzled Falcons still had never beaten the Rams.
Norm Van Brocklin must be kicking himself for deciding to go for that first down instead of the easy field goal.
The Dutchman won't forget that play or what you just said, I'm sure. But there's another wild game in the other half of the NFC West in New Orleans, where wild games are becoming a way of life.
Following their opening day upset by the Falcons, the 49ers charged into New Orleans intent upon regaining the championship touch. But the Saints had upset hero Archie Super Manning, and the New Orleans faithful were breathless with anticipation. Early in the first quarter, the Saints' offensive line gave Manning a reasonable amount of time to pass. Archie found tight end Dave Parks for sizable gains, and the Saints moved deep into San Francisco territory. Just as the New Orleans Express seemed touchdown bound, a strange thing happened to its engineer. As Manning stepped up into the pocket, a stray hand found its way directly into Manning's eye, and he was forced to leave the game for the remainder of the first half. Moments later, 49er Johnny Fuller charged in to block Skip Butler's field goal attempt. The loose ball was picked up by Bruce Taylor, who dribbled it once, and then quickly covered the remainder of the 70 yards to the New Orleans end zone. In the second quarter, the slippery New Orleans kicking game led to another easy 49er touchdown. Trailing 14-0, Archie Manning's replacement, Ed Hargett, passed to Dan Abramowitz in the end zone, and the 49er lead was cut to 14-7 at the half. For Dan Abramowitz, this was only the beginning. In the second half, Archie Manning returned and threw 2 more touchdowns to the gritty 5-year receiver from Xavier, the 17th round choice in the Saints' first season, and now a man who has caught more passes in the past 4 seasons than anyone else in pro football. For Dan Abramowitz, Archie Manning, and the Saints, 3 touchdowns were not enough to tip the balance. 8 times the 49ers made the New Orleans quarterback pay. While the 49ers had no sustained offensive drives at all, they didn't need any, with the kind of field position their defense gave them. When John Brody's offense was in position to score, they scored, with the kind of fluid drive supplied by running back Doug Cunningham, number 42. Just about everyone who remembers 1970 will recall that John Brody's favorite partner was another former Stanford quarterback, Gene Washington, number 18. Gene Washington may still be John Brody's favorite partner, but now there's a new Washington to watch for, rookie running back Vic Washington, number 22. And last Sunday in New Orleans, he was the 49ers' most effective offensive weapon, with the biggest plays both receiving and rushing, a 12-yard rushing average in 7 attempts, and the game's most impressive all-around performance, as the opportunistic San Franciscans slid past the youthful Saints 38-20.
As somebody said a few weeks ago, look out for the 49ers. I think your old teammate Dick Nolan, the coach, said that.
He probably did, and the way they played last week against New Orleans, he might have been right. And I'm sure we'll both have to pick them over Philadelphia this week. But there are a few other games that aren't quite so obvious. After 2 weeks, let's see, standings are I'm 3 right and 2 wrong.
I'm 2-3, which means I've got a long way to come back. All right, let's look at a big ball game. Washington, the Redskins against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, you saw Washington last week. Is Billy Kilmer for real? Is he throwing spirals now?
He threw them all day at Yankee Stadium, the best I think I've seen anybody throw the ball in a long time, and he doesn't have that kind of reputation. Of course, Washington's got three, I think, outstanding receivers, probably the best trio in the league, at least in my opinion, Roy Jefferson, Jerry Smith, and Charlie Taylor. So they're going to be tough for anybody to contain. Still, at the Cotton Bowl, I like the Cowboys.
I'll tell you, that Dallas defense, if anything, is about ready for maybe a Super Bowl now. They played great against Philadelphia last week. I'm gonna go with the Redskins just for the upset possibility, thinking maybe Allen has a better defense in Washington, too.
He's done a remarkable job. Okay, how about Oakland at Cleveland?
The Oakland Raiders, boy, the offense is certainly back. Monica had more than just an average game for him, but I understand their young people on defense will give Cleveland some pretty tough moments, right?
Okay, I'll take the Browns in.
I'll go with the Oakland Raiders then to finally dent that real good Cleveland defense.
Okay, we'll be back next week to show you what happens. I'm Pat Summerall.
And I'm Tom Brookshire. We'll see you next week.
This Week in Pro Football has been brought to you by the 1972 Buick, something to believe in. And by Hager, the Slacks people. We make everybody look good. This program has been a color feature presentation on the Hughes Sports Network.